Hi everyone. Okay, let's have a little bit of a more in-depth look into the tuition, education, and textbook amounts. Right now, we're going to start with Schedule 11, and then we'll move over to the Nova Scotia Schedule 11. Okay, so let's have a look at here. So eligible tuition fees paid. So if we used the example from last week, which was Sue, it would be $8,000. Okay, so if you are claiming the Canada training credit, okay, so as I mentioned in the video last week, I was thinking the age was 25, but you actually have to be at least 26 to qualify for these. So it's not going to be something that we're going to go in depth on in this course. However, it is something that you can very easily look up on the CRA website and follow it through if at some point you need to look into that a little bit further. Okay, so our Canada training amount is going to be 0. So therefore, our tuition amount is going to be the $8,000. Eligible tuition paid to a foreign institution is 0. So again, $8,000 is going to be carried down. Unused federal tuition, education, and textbook amount from your 2022 Notice of Assessment or reassessment if you filed a return and then filed an amended return. So if you look on the bottom of your Notice of Assessment, you will see on there your limits. So if you have RRSP room that you can contribute more because you haven't used up all the space in every given year. And in this one here, if you didn't need all of your federal tuition or your provincial tuition, as you saw in the return last week for Sue Brown, she didn't need all of it. So some of it was carried forward. And I'm going to show you how to do the carry forward. But if you remember, she had about $2,500 in tuition, and she only needed $1,100. Okay, so for this example, we're going to pretend that back in 2022, when we looked at our Notice of Assessment, we saw that we didn't need all of the tuition fee that we had, so we carried it forward. So I'm going to add it onto this one. So say we had $2,000 left over from last year. And again, I got this figure from our Notice of Assessment. So then the total available from previous years and this given year is $10,000. So now we come down here again and we look at the amount from line 2600, and then we subtract off the amount from 101 of our return to find out how much we actually need to cover. Okay, so we had, let's say, sorry, I'm just getting my paper. So let's say we had 17,958 and 67 cents, which I'm pretty sure comes directly from her return, Sue's. And then on line 101 of our return, we had 17,316.99. Okay, so one is showing how much we have to pay in federal tax. The other is showing the tax credits that we have. So we only need $641.68. Okay, so the unused tuition, education, and textbook amount you are claiming for 2023. So we can enter whichever is less, line 9, which is 2,000, or line 13. So we only need the 641.68. Okay. So line 13 minus line 14. Okay. So again, whichever is less. So we need the 641.68. And all this is saying is that instead of using any of the 8,000 from this year, I'm going to use some of the unused that I already had accumulated. Okay, so we've got line 13 minus line 14. We've got 0, so that's the amount from our current. So then the 2023 tuition amount, enter whichever is less from line 8 and line 15. So line 8, which is our 8,000 from this year, and line 15, which is how much we need to use from this year, we need 0. Okay. So then we're going to add up our line 14 plus line 16 to show 641.68. So again, all that is doing is taking the amount from this year, adding in the unused amount from previous years that we got from our 2022 notice of assessment to show the total amount that we have available to use. Okay? Then, once we know how much we have to use, which is the full 10,000, then we're figuring out how much we need to use. So the first line is how much we have to pay in federal, subtracting off the non-refundable tax credits that we have, and the difference is 641.68. So currently it's showing that we need coverage of 641.68 so that we don't have to pay any federal tax. Okay, so we're bringing that forward. We're showing that of the 10,000, we're using the 641.68, subtract off any that we need from our current year. So it's showing that the amount that we're going to use in total is the 641.68, and that gets carried forward to our line 32,300 on our federal return. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to come down here, and this is where we put in our enrollment. So we were full-time, or she was full-time, 8 months. Okay, so now transfer or carry forward of unused amount. So amount from line 10 of the previous page. So line 10 is our 10,000. Line 17 from the previous page. That's the amount we're actually going to use, which are the only amount that we need to use, 641.68. So 641.68. So the amount of unused now is $9,358.32. So of that amount that we have unused, it's asking us if we want to transfer, or if Sue wants to transfer an amount to a designated individual. And if she does, then the most in any given year that you can transfer is $5,000. So what I tell a lot of people about this is, if a parent or somebody else actually paid for your tuition, then I would transfer the amount over to that individual. However, if you paid for your tuition and you're putting yourself through school, I wouldn't transfer that credit to anyone else. I'd keep that so that in future years, when you actually start earning a bigger income, you have that amount to fall back on, and you can reduce your taxes in that first year. Okay. So then if you do want to transfer it over, you would put, if you want to put the maximum of 5,000, you put that on line 21. and then amount from line 16 of the previous page. Line 16 is the 0. And then it would be line 21 minus line 22 to give you the unused amount, which is line 23 that you were allowed to transfer. So if you put 5,000 here, put 0, and then you'd be able to transfer 5,000. Okay. And then enter the amount that you transferred. So if you transferred 5,000, you'd put 5,000 on line 24. If you didn't transfer any, then we'd put 0. And then the amount that goes on line 25 is the amount that you're going to carry over, 58.32. And by having that amount on line 25, that amount is the amount that's going to end up, if all of your corrections if all of your calculations are correct, that is the amount that when you get your notice of assessment from filing this year's tax return, that amount is going to be on the bottom of that notice of assessment saying that that is your amount of carry forward for future years. Okay, so we'll briefly look over at the Nova Scotia tuition one. So on the Nova Scotia Schedule 11, we have, the lines are in a little bit of a different order. So if you notice here, the unused tuition and education amount from your notice of assessment for the previous year, so 2022 is line 1. Okay, so again, that amount for your provincial can be found on your notice of assessment. However, if you lived in a different province or territory other than Nova Scotia on December 31st, 2022, then they want you to just use your unused federal tuition. Okay. Okay, so let's say for our Nova Scotia tuition, the unused amount that we look at the bottom of our notice of assessment, and we determine that we have $2,400. Okay, so now we want to enter the amount from line 8 of our federal Schedule 11. So if we go back over to our federal Schedule 11, and we look at line 8, we've got our 8,000. Okay, so we fill in our 8,000. And then we're looking at our monthly amount. So again, we've got 8, we've got 1,600, because we've got 8 times 200, and we've got 1,600. And then 1,600. So then our total, sorry, I did not add that correctly. I need to add the two together. All right. Oh, so watch that, because I know it's easy to do, and I've seen several of you do it on the TD1s. Okay, so watch that. It needs to add lines 2 to line 4. So you need the 8,000 if there's anything in the part-time, and then the full-time. Okay, so now we need to add the 2,400 with the 9,600. So that gives us 12,000 as our carry forward. Okay, so again, from here, it's the same type of calculation as what you did on the federal, okay, for you to be able to come up with how much you need to use or can use in this year. And then here is your carry forward amounts. Again, very similar, if not almost identical to the federal. So we figure out what our unused portion is, and that we're going to carry forward and find on next year's notice of assessment if we don't give a designated person that 5,000. So again, this form can be filled out pretty much the exact same way as the federal. Thanks everyone, and let me know if you have any questions.